Let me hope I'm live on video. Let me hope I'm live on video. Well, let me hope I'm loud and clear and everyone can hear me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, watching me from wherever you are. It is a Thursday. Today is uh, uh, today is today is 2nd of course May. This is a new month. Yeah, let me hope your day has been good wherever you're watching me from. Let me hope everything is moving on well. Um, today, it has been somehow terrible in Uganda. As you can see me, it is just 3, but I'm putting on a jacket. It is cold outside. Uh, it is very cold outside. Today it has been very cold in Uganda, extremely very cold because it has rained and rained. It is just 3 in Uganda, but you see me putting on a jacket. It is terrible outside there. But let me hope everything is moving on well for those that are watching me from Facebook, Twitter, and of course YouTube. And endeavor to subscribe whenever you're new. You're new on these channels, Black Hot Fire channels, that is Facebook. Like and follow the page. If you're new, you have not followed yet. YouTube, endeavor to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Yeah, as well as Twitter. Twitter, we normally have actually big numbers on Twitter, but disappoint us to some extent. I'm sorry to say this. We humbly ask you to, of course, like our page so that it can grow. Yeah, today's topic is also a nice one, just like the topics we normally bring in here on Blackwood Fire Network to discuss about. Today's topic is uh, today's topic is about religious wars in Africa, the different religious wars we see in Africa. Yes, the continent has been struck by a lot of things. Today, we see floods, but there are those, of course, uh, differences we have in Africa. First of all, the tribal issue, as well as the religious issue we see in today, that is, of course, affecting Africa and actually almost all African countries, because when the colonizers, their target was to spread their religion across the entire continent. So we have seen a lot of countries, African countries, going through, of course, experiencing wars over time. Recently, actually, in today's news, we saw we are seeing riots in, of course, South Africa. We are seeing a lot of riots in South Africa coming from, of course, the priest that, of course, who was, of course, killed in South Africa. A lot of South Africans have are coming out, of course, on streets to riot over um, the incident of the priest. But uh, what could be the cause of such incidences, of course, happening in the world, of course, in Africa? Why could we see people being murdered in the name of religion? So, talking about this most recent incident in, of course, South Africa, we see that murder of the priests highlights, of course, rising violence in South Africa. So we see that Yode, of course, Cameroon, in an incident that highlights the grim reality of South Africa's deteriorating security crises. Another priest has fallen a victim to violence. So Father Paul Tattoo Mathombi, this is actually the father that this was the father that was killed in South Africa. So Father Paul Tattoo Mothobi, former media and communications officer of the Southern African Catholic Bishops' Conference, was found dead. So, of course, on April 27th, and that is at the end of last month. So, according to Father Jeremiah Thambi, the provincial secretary of the Congregation of the Sacred Stigma, also called the, Stagimata, to which Mathombi belonged, his body was found in his car with bullet wounds along the road that runs from the Cape Town through Bloemfontein, Johannesburg, Pretoria, and, of course, Barokweni to Beit Bridge, a border town with Zimbabwe. So the priest, who comes from Lesotho's Catholic Archdiocese, as Maseru, was studying for his doctorate in communication at the University of Johannesburg when he met his death. So this we see that the father said that I worked closely with Father Tatu when he served the church as a communication officer of the SACBC, said Father Satan Mayembe, director at the Justice and Peace Commission for Catholic Bishops Conference of South Africa. So the two agencies, the communications officer and the SACBC Justice and Peace Commission, worked closely together. So we see that he says that I remember him as a jovial and humble person, deeply committed to Christ and mission of the church, so interested in continuing learning and studies and always seeking ways through which multimedia can be brought to the service of evangelization in the South Africa, he told Crooks. So Johan Vision, the director of Dennis Harry Peace Institute, DHPI of South Africa Bishops Conference, said he was deeply shocked by the killing of the Catholic father, Paul. Very many, of course, religious people in South Africa had worked with this guy, with this Catholic father that was, of course, murdered last month on 27th. This is not the first incident we are seeing religious people being killed, or people that are being called the religious people being killed in vain. We have seen a lot of Muslims being killed. We have seen a lot of civilians, people unarmed, being killed. Um, in of course in bloodshed. So we see that nobody is safe in South Africa, and the government is doing nothing to improve the situation. So they have lost touch with the people they claim to represent, thinking only of how to enrich themselves. The police are not the solution, they are part of the problem as any foreigner. They will tell you how they are assaulted and robbed by police almost daily. So we see that Catholic bishops of South Africa have, in a collective statement, issued uh, uh, and expressed shock at the killing of the priest and offered condolences to his family. So, besides someone to be called religious, someone to be called a sheikh, someone to be called a father, someone to be called a brother, someone to be called a nun, someone to be called Buddha. Is it Buddha? Is it Buddha? I don't know how those people. I don't know actually. I even don't know how the Baha'i call their leaders. That I've not searched enough about the Baha'i, but there are a lot of religions. If we can, of course, start counting down religions in Africa, there are very many religions we see in Africa, very many religions, but all these religions are not at peace. All the religions target people, target innocent people, and of course, separating people separate, because if at all very many we see of course Catholics being divided into born again Protestants, Orthodox, we have Seventh Days, we have a Pentecostals, like a lot of people, like a lot of religions coming out. So there is no religion I've ever seen that calls for unity. Apart from claiming that we, of course, have one God, we believe in one God, nothing else of course, they do in, of course, in calling upon people to be one people. Very many religions have different ideologies and different agendas they base on. We have religions that, of course, to kill someone, they claim that their God is going to give you, of course, some you're going to go directly to heaven. You're going to be forgiven all your sins you have done on earth. The religions we have in Africa here. So a lot of people in Africa have been confused about religion, and of course, we see that um, um, we see that religious conflicts are on the rise in Africa. So, conflicts that have a religious dimension are becoming more common worldwide, and Sub Saharan Africa is no exception. The religion is greatly, of course, vulnerable to conflicts because many states in Sub Saharan Africa are often weak. It also actually it also has to do with the fact that religious conflicts spill over from North Africa and the Middle East, either directly from Libya or Algeria, or indirectly through the spread of more radical versions of Islam and other religions. By the way, like people who have not researched enough think that Islam is not divided into portions, it's not fragmented. Islam is also, of course, divided into multiple Islamic versions. Just like the Christians, we see that we have a lot of Christians born again could call themselves Christians. When we look at when we look at when we look at Protestants, they call themselves Christians. When we look at Pentecostals, they call themselves Christian. They call themselves Christians. We have Salvins, they call themselves Christians, Orthodox call themselves Christians, and other versions of Christianity, and of course Islamic religion, and others, the Buddhas, the Baha'i, and others. So, however, we see that religion is only one aspect of these conflicts. They can also be ethnic conflicts and conflicts over power or resources. There is no conflict based purely on religion. So, we see that um, heterogeneous population and religious communities are particularly susceptible to religious conflicts. Somalia is one of the most unstable countries in Africa. It is also one of the most religiously homogeneous country on the continent. So in Nigeria, the Boko Haram Islamists also frequently attack Muslims. So we may think that uh, uh, um, Boko Haram, the Muslims, we wouldn't expect them, of course, uh, to attack Muslims. But Boko Haram, they also attack Muslims themselves. They attack their fellow Muslims. So, What does this mean? Religion bases on a lot of things. Different religions have different agendas. As long as someone has a number to control, they indoctrinate their ideas in those people differently. So basically, one of the most distinguished between types of religious conflicts, uh, in interreligious conflicts, we have the conflict parties differ in their religion affiliation. For example, Christians and Muslims, this can overlap with ethnic identities, and it is clear that heterogeneous societies are more variable, of course, vulnerable to triggering conflicts along these lines. This is, of course, different from theological conflicts, which are mostly about religious ideas, such as conflicts can, of course, arise in majority Muslim societies such as Mali, Somalia, or northern Nigeria, where we see the Fulani and Hausa who are Muslims. But we are also aware of examples of Christian rebels in sub-Saharan Africa who have theological demands. The parties involved may differ on the question of what role religion should play in the state. For example, radical Muslim groups demand the introduction of Sharia law. A weak state allows these kinds of groups to be active in the first place. Their radical ideology becomes more attractive to people if the state does not provide adequate public services and politicians are corrupt. But of course, not all Muslims in these countries are radical Islamists. We see a lot of Muslims who are believe that things happen, but most importantly, we see that we see that sorry, we see that different, of course, religious conflicts or religious rebel or groups, they don't care whether they are fighting on which side of or which side, but basically one must distinguish between types of religious conflicts, interreligious conflicts, and the conflict parties differ in their religion affiliation. For example, I talked about the Christians and Muslims. This can overlap with ethnic identities, and it is clear that heterogeneous societies are more variable in triggering conflicts along these lines. However, I'm really very sorry for that inconvenience. Like I said, it has been raining almost the entire day today. So electricity is on and off here. I'm back. I'm back. Like I was saying that uh, active radical groups have more direct influence in North Africa, such as the Al Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb or offshoots of the so-called Islamic State. They have an interest in creating branches in other countries. They have supported rebels in, of course, Mali, and there are indications that they are also doing it in Nigeria and Somalia. So other Middle East and states are more likely to have an indirect influence. So it is about spreading a radical version of Islam. Sub-Saharan Africa traditionally was a home to a rather moderate form of Islam. For example, the Sufish countries like Saudi Arabia or Qatar are spreading Wahhabism or similar variants, which can indirectly create a radical ideology that leads to violence. But it is not entirely clear how this influence is spreading and how strong it is. So, um, talking about the countermeasures, where must be based on careful, we see that we do not know anything yet about, of course, the measures that are likely to take hold. Firstly, we need to be aware of that there are both religious and non-religious causes that must be dealt with at the same time. So, other on the religious side, we see that religion being seen in different, of course, African countries today. Um, uh, we see that in, of course, in recent years, armed conflicts with religious overtones in countries like the Central African Republic, uh, Mali, Nigeria, and Somalia have been on the rise in sub-Saharan Africa. One possible explanation of this rise is religious discrimination. So we see that discrimination should, of course, bleed grievances and hence result in aggression and violence. So the jury is out of course, religious groups, while some evidence suggests that the ethno-religious minorities have, of course, slightly increased the conflict risk, where the group level, of course, analyses show that discrimination, grievances, and violence are largely, of course, unconnected. Um, Africa, of course, South Africa of the Africa, south of the Sahara is rarely, of course, investigated in detail. And if religion and conflict, of course, are, of course, analyzed, religious discrimination seems to play a minor role. So, um, we see that the rise of religious, of course, discrimination in sub-Saharan Africa has coincided with the rise in religious armed conflicts. Before describing patterns, we should, of course, clarify what religious armed conflicts are. It has become, of course, increasingly accepted to distinguish two socially relevant dimensions of religion for such conflicts. So, warring factions can differ over the content of the religion. For instance, they can hold different views on the role of the religion in the state. So, jihadists, of course, rebellions like in Mali and Nigeria are such theological armed conflicts, as we call them, but they can occur in any faith. In contrast, we see that identity based on religion armed conflicts are characterized by a nominal difference in religious group identity between the conflict parties. So a conflict between Christians and Muslims, like in the Central African Republic, can thus be labeled an interreligious armed conflict. Interreligious armed conflicts also include cases in which big, of course, of course, dominations like the Protestants and Catholic Christians or Sunni or Shia Muslims clash. Interreligious conflicts can also be, but not necessarily over religious or over religious content. In cases like Central African Republic, there seems to be no pronounced content related or theological dimension to the conflict. In Mali, we see that the conflict parties have not, of course, differed by identity as all the Sunni Muslims, but over content. Both types can occur simultaneously, but not necessarily so. So, as already mentioned, the number of religious conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa has, of course, increased, especially when we look at the share of all conflicts and in the recent years. The main increase can be traced back to the theological conflicts, which the share of interreligious conflicts has become more stable. So notorious examples are the Islamist, of course, Tuareg rebellion since 2012 in Mali, the Boko Haram uprising in Nigeria, and the conflict with the Al Shabaab Militania in Somalia. There are less known cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Bundu Dia Congo has demanded the religious state based on, of course, the Scrinitic form of Christianity. The Lord's Resistance Army that originates in Uganda conflict shows a strong interreligious dimension, partially in the conjunction with the theological incapabilities. The Sudanese Civil War was a showcase of how Muslims and the Christians, and of course, animists clashed in bloody confrontations. Massive bloodshed between Christians and Muslims has halted the Central African Republic since 2013. In Ethiopia, a Christian dominated government is fighting a number of predominantly Muslim rebel groups. So, we see that we would expect the religious discrimination, that religious discrimination may lead to armed conflict, especially those with religious overtones. So, um, we see that the descriptive overview in the previous section fuels the suspicion that religious discrimination may indeed increase the likelihood of religious armed conflict theoretically, as argued above in what, of course, what I said in the first moment, how, of course, religious conflicts are divided into uh, uh, theological part and, of course, interreligious part. When you will look at armed groups like the Boko Haram of course, in Nigeria, these are people that are too theological, if I may say. These are people that are not based on religion, because they even have, these people attack even their fellow Muslims. So they don't care whether you're Muslim or not. It is like a Muslim-led group, but it doesn't care whether you're Muslim or not. It attacks all people. And also in the religious conflicts, as we see in the Central African Republic. So we see that religious, of course, violence comes from the phenomena in which religion is either the subject or the object of violent behavior. So, all religion of the world contain narratives, symbols, and, of course, metaphors of violence and war. So, religious violence is, of course, a violence that is motivated by or in reaction to the religious preceptive texts and of course doctrines of a target or an attacker. It includes violence against religious institutions, people, objects, or events. So, religious violence does not exclusively include acts which are, of course, committed by religious groups. Instead, it includes acts which are committed against religious groups. So, violence is a very, of course, broad core, of course, concept which is difficult to define because it is used against both human and non-human objects. Furthermore, the term can detonate um, a wide variety of experiences such as bloodshedding, physical harm, and forcing against personal freedom, passionate conduct, and language. So, religion, we see that religion is, of course, a modern concept. The count talking about religion and of course violence, we see that currently we see that available evidence does not allow us to determine whether religion is or not, but a significant cause of violence. We see that multiple problems that make it possible to establish a causal relationship, such as difficulties in distinguish motive, pretext, and inability to verify, they would necessarily lead to any violent action. So, the lack of consensus of the definition of both violence and religion among very many people, we see that the inability to see if the presence of religion actually adds or subtracts from general levels of violence, since no society without religion has ever existed to compare with. So, um, uh, um, religion, religion, and of course, religion, and of course, really different religious wars in Africa. Um, it is very injustice to talk about conflicts in religion and forget about talk about what I'm going to talk about here down. So, religious conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa have indeed been on a rise for decades. We see that religious dimensions are in conflicts in, of course, indicate that 8 out of the 10 active armed conflicts in sub-Saharan Africa have a religious dimension. So, vulnerability of sub-Saharan African states, we see that the region is generally vulnerable to conflicts because many states in the sub-Saharan Africa are often weak. So these weak states struggle to provide adequate public services, and corruption among politicians. So heterogeneous populations and religious communities also, of course, lead to conflicts in Africa. So the influence from North Africa and the Middle East among the Muslims has also been a lead in, of course, influencing active radical groups like Al Qaeda in, of course, the Islamic Maghreb, who have more direct impact in, of course, North Africa. So the indirect influence, we see that conflicts spill over from North Africa and the Middle East, either directly from Libya or Algeria, or indirectly through the spread of more radical versions of Islam. I said even Islamic religion has more versions. Like someone may ask, "Hey, how does it come?" Like we see that even of course even of course Islam has versions. Like we look at the like looking up like the Christians, the Catholics. We look at Protestants, Orthodox, and others, born again. Even these Muslims have, of course, they have versions. I see some of the Muslims I see here in Uganda. I find those with very short panties. They have very short trousers. You find those that don't believe in very short trousers. You find those that wear different capes on their heads. Those Muslim capes. You find others having there are a lot of versions, Islamic religion versions, if I may, of course, say. But uh, a lot of people, even politicians in African countries, they have used this advantage to, of course, create, confusion among people. Looking at, for example, looking at our own here in Uganda, Bobby Wine. This is a guy that bases his ideologies, he bases his campaigns even in prior to 2021, before he went in for elections. This was a guy who, of course, who was intensifying, who was making matters worse for, of course, religious, different religions in, of course, in Uganda. This was a guy who was like, Muslims, you're not liked in Uganda, you're not given privileges. Whenever they are arresting, whenever they are detaining, they detain Muslims. So Muslims became angry during that time just because of this ideology. So religion, to me, religious wars or religion is crime. When you look at wars based on religion, all those are crimes. So, in the ever difficult process of course, transitioning to democracy and stability in developing nations, one is, of course, hard pressed to think of the phenomenon more, of course, detrimental, even anti-ethical. So, to the process than armed conflict. In addition, um, the destructive effect of the religious conflicts, especially in civil conflicts on the state institutions. It often perpetuates the conflict trap, whereby economic development is undermined, which in turn may undermine the sort of institutional development which depends on economic stability. So, given the higher prevalence of the civic, religious conflicts in Africa, examining what role religion may play in Africa's political and economic development must therefore seek to understand the role religious identity plays in some of the Africa's civil conflicts. We see that Africa is the scene of course, disturbingly high proportion of the world's civil conflicts. Yet the role of the religion varies considerably in cases such as the outbreak of armed conflict in the Cote d'Ivoire in 2002. If at all you can remember, if I told you you can remember that conflict in Cote d'Ivoire, the armed conflict in Cote d'Ivoire in 2002, religious divisions appear to provide a more major fault line along the civil conflict. We see that there has been mobilized. In other cases, ethnic divisions form the basis of the conflict, even where both warring groups share a common religion, and the common identity of religion seems powerless to, of course, facilitate peace. In Rwanda, for example, Hutus and, of course, Tutsis are both predominantly Catholic, and many victims of the genocide. They are sought, of course, refuge in churches as killings unfolded beyond the obvious failure of the common identity to stop the bloodshed, as well as the failure to such churches to serve as effective sanctuaries. So some religious leaders have ever been convicted for their role in, of course, facilitating the slaughter in Rwanda. By contrast, we see that religious leaders in Kenya played a vital role in negotiating peace among warring ethnic groups in the Rift Valley. during the early 1990s. In still other cases, the role of religion exhibits an ability to shift quite, of course, markedly in one of the most civil conflicts. Just as the Sudanese decades long North South civil war was, of course, ending, a conflict largely characterized as between Muslim and Christian animist ending. A conflict largely, we see that animist peoples, the current conflict in the far region of Sudan began among peoples who share Islam as a common faith, divided instead by ethnicity. So, with that, under what conditions do religious identity divisions become a fault lines along the civil conflict occurs? So, we see that however much we see a lot of things happen in Africa, however much we see Africans being divided, of course, on of course religious differences, governments are still using this chance. Uh, different governments in Africa are using the same uh, uh, are using the same trick to divide the people and rule people. If at all the colonizers used direct and indirect rule here, they introduced Christianity knowingly. They introduced Christianity basing on ideology and, of course, uh, basing on ideology. So you find people like I was reading news where a Nigerian boy was caned for praying in a Catholic church in Nigeria. This is happening in Africa. Why is it that we have not seen we are not seeing Africans coming back to the roots of course African traditions, going back to the roots of our ancestors because they had no differences. What they were praising, what the spirituality they believed in accommodated everyone. But if at all we can see a kid being caned in Nigeria just because he attended uh, a church. He attended church instead of going for mosque, instead of attending mosque. It is terrible for attending church in Africa. But I think it was Nigeria. I think it was Nigeria, if I'm not mistaken. It was Nigeria. So no, seven. No, not that one. Not that one. Yeah, that one. I was reading somewhere. Uh, the- eh, eh, listen, well, wow. The thing was like 70 members of Muslim family in the eastern Uganda. This thing happened. Damn, there, there. This thing, I don't know. Like I read about this news and it was like it was in Nigeria, but it was in Uganda here. Like 7 members of a Muslim family in eastern Uganda have been arrested by authorities for allegedly assaulting an 18-year-old girl who attended church service. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Family members, not even the government, family members attacking. And whenever we see governments in Africa, these, of course, are people that are governments. Whenever governments come in, they influence they influence the country, the state, depending on their religion. During the regime of Idi Amin Dada in Uganda, we saw Uganda was becoming a Muslim country during that time. We have seen a lot of presidents. If at all the president comes in when he's a Buddhist, we hope to see all people becoming praising Buddhism. If at all the president comes in, I don't know whether this thing happens even outside Africa, but whenever the president comes in and is a born again, we're going to see a lot of born again churches around. This is how these people influence. They try to, of course, favor their religions compared to other religions. That's why in Uganda, Bobby Wine tried to, of course, convince Muslims to tell them that they are not liked in Uganda, they are mistreated, they are not given chance to speak, they are not tried in courts of law, they're just detained without trial, just because he wanted to win the hearts of the Muslims, because they seem to be, of course, less privileged. And of course, we don't have a lot of Muslims in Uganda. They don't have a lot of Muslims in Uganda, by the way, uh, compared to, of course, to other religions, as we may see. Like you find out, like in Nigeria, you find out the whole region, the whole North Nigeria is, of course, uh, uh, are covered by Muslims. I've not seen that yet in, of course, in Uganda. I've not seen that. I've not seen that in Uganda. But it is always disgusting to see people fighting, to see people fighting just because of religion. Um, Africa, as a country, is experiencing a lot of things, and and stupidly enough, Africans, we don't learn from, of course, first of all, our mistakes. We don't see, we don't, of course, prioritize the things that can, of course, bring in development. Because the more we are going to be divided, the more we are going to be separated, the more we are going to discriminate ourselves, the more we are going to, of course, we are not going to focus on on development. We are going to stay poor amidst having the richest continent with minerals that can support, of course, Africa, and of course respective states in Africa. So we see that the middle uh, we see that the Middle East is a home to some of the world's most chaotic and violent zones, including Libya, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, as well as, of course, smearing conflicts in states such as Israel and, of course, Lebanon. And while these, of course, conflicts usually have multiple causes, religion and religious hostilities certainly are important factors. So, as a whole region continue to have a highest levels of religious hostilities in the world. In 2020 and 14, we see that the median level of religious hostilities in the Middle East and North Africa reached a level 4 times that of the global median. So the types of social hostilities including in this measure varied from religion related to armed conflict to sectarian violence and other religion related, of course, intimidation or abuse. So 6 countries in the Middle East, North African region had very high levels of religious hostilities during the year including Israel, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, and of course Palestinian territories. So violent acts in Iraq by both Sunni and Shia dominated groups and militias, including the ISIS, led to killings, kidnappings, and harassment and intimidation and displacements. And these things happen here. Whenever these people attack, whenever these people create war, whenever these people create violence and conflicts, that is what happens. So the Middle East North African region had the largest share of countries experiencing, of course, religion related to terrorism in 2014, although the Asia Pacific region had the largest increase in the share of countries that did so. We see terrorist activities became more lethal in Israel in particular, where attacks resulted in over 50 casualties in 2014. So members of the Abu Mali Mustafa, of course, brigades claimed the responsibility for uh, one of these attacks, which killed at least 5 people, including 4 rabbis, in of course November that year. So there are even more, of course, there are even more reports where we see harassments of Christians and Jews by both the government forces and social groups increased slightly. So we see that Christians were harassed in 16 out of the 20 country regions, up from 15 countries in 2013. And the Jews were, of course, harassed in 18 countries. So, um, so, so So talking about the religious conflict of course, the religious war in the Central African Republic, we see that continues. On May 2nd, 2018, we see that gunmen with grenades attacked the Notre Dame de Fatima Church, a Roman Catholic church in, of course, Baguio in the Central African Republic. 15 people were killed immediately and dozens injured. The attack comes a few weeks after 28 people were killed in violent clashes after the operation launched by UN peacekeepers and local security forces in the neighboring Baguio district of PK5. So this sectarian violence has been escalating since February 2018. The recent attacks are nothing new as religious and ethnic conflicts have halted the country for several years, reaching a peak at the end of 2012 prior to 2012. So 85% of the population of the Central African Republic were Christians, with 15% of the Muslim minority. This, of course, changed significantly over the years. In the late 2012, we see that an umbrella terror group called Seleka, predominantly Muslims, supported by the Chadian and of course the Sudanese foreign fighters, began to occupy towns in the northern part of Central African Republic. A short-lived peace agreement collapsed in March 2013 and the terror group took control of the capital of Central African Republic, Baguio, ousting President Francois Bozizé. So uh, the sectarian violence, targeted killings, uh, more of course motivated by religion, escalated after the 2013 coup. Of course, atrocities included execution, rape, sexual abuse, enforced disappearance, illegal detention, and torture. So the terror group was formally dissolved in September 2013 by its leader and self-proclaimed president Michel Djordaya in light of the international condemnation of the crimes perpetrated by the group. Nonetheless, the ex-Seleka fighters, now members of the multiple smaller group, continue to engage in atrocities. In retaliation to those atrocities, in June 2013, a self-defense militia um, former Central African armed forces, soldiers, and other non-Muslims, so-called Ant-Balaka, united their forces. These ex-Seleka and Ant-Balaka have been engaged in fighting a religious war in Central African Republic since September 2013. So, the conflict escalated after Anti-Balaka attacked Muslim neighborhoods in Baguio in December 2013, resulting in a full-blown religious conflict that affected the whole nation. We see that in December 2014, the International Commission of Inquiry on the Central African Republic released a report confirming that there had been, of course, a pattern of ethnic cleansing committed by the anti-Balaka in the areas in which Muslims had been living, which wasn't true. These findings followed the January 2014 violence unleashed by the anti-Balaka fighters who had begun to kill Muslims based on their religious identity. So this violence has led to the forcible displacement of the 99% of the Muslim population of Burkina. Furthermore, 80% of the Muslim population of the Central African Republic has since fled to Cameroon and Chad. So we see that out of the 436 mosques in the country, 417 were destroyed. So the country the return of the Muslim minorities back to the Central African Republic has been very slow ever since that the remaining Muslim minorities predominantly live in the peacekeeper protected enclaves. So some of those who have returned back to their homes report being forced to convert by anti-Barata Balaka soldiers. So UN peacekeepers have also, of course, seen the returning Muslim minorities subjected to harassment and abuse. So religious identity continues to be one of the most significant predators of violence in the Central African Republic even up to today. So many Muslim communities remain displaced, and in the west parts, Muslims cannot practice their faith really. The Central African Republican government has initiated some work to ensure renewed interfaith cooperation and address. So the growing tensions between the religious communities, however, without adequate reconciliation efforts, this has not, of course, achieved the desired results. We saw that the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom founded that the situation in Central African Republic merits the designation of the country of particular concern. In its 2008, we see that in its 2018 report, we see that Muslim minorities in the Central African Republic had been subjected to marginalization even before the recent conflict arose. So Muslims continue to suffer from synthetic discrimination in a wide range of areas, including their access to education and identity documents. So the ongoing violence has resulted in over 2.3 million people requiring humanitarian assistance. It has created more than 450,000 refugees and almost 350,000 internally depressed persons. Those, of course, thousands lost their lives in this war. So the recent attacks and, of course, escalation of the violence in the Central African Republic is nothing new. So the religious conflict is deeply rooted and had not yet been adequately addressed. So the conflict cannot be analyzed in the vacuum. Any response to the attacks needs to take into consideration the historic internal conflicts, any future comprehensive plans to combat sectarian violence. It must accommodate interfaith dialogue and reconciliation. So, above all, it must ensure the human rights are affordable to all people in Central African Republic and people in Africa. So, including the right of freedom of religion, a belief to the minority Muslim group. So, more needs to be done to help Muslim minorities in Central African Republic today. This includes ensuring that the refugees and the internally displaced peoples are allowed to return to their homes, that they had provided adequate protection, that they are guaranteed, of course, to are guaranteed to basic rights in equality with other majority groups in Central African Republic. So the Central African Republican government must also ensure that the religious war between the ex-Sereka and the anti-Balaka fighters uh, is adequately investigated, and that prosecutions are pursued against these parties for their role in the sectarian violence in the Central African Republic. Combating impunity, of course, can greatly support reconciliation and community cohesions in, of course, Central African Republic. So Yes, I know it sells. Hello, how are you doing, my brother? Let me hope everything is doing good. Yeah, let me think everything is doing good. I know it sells. Let me hope you're doing good. Um, I don't know what is your submission about religious wars in Africa. We have seen almost every African country, sorry, is having a particular religion, leaving alone the ancestral religions, the African traditional religions we had before the coming of the missionaries and of course the colonialists in African countries. So I don't know what is your take about religion, about religious wars. A lot of people praise religions in Africa for have of course created and of course forged unity in African countries and of course tried to heal people's souls. But in a bigger perspective, we are seeing religions being one of the issues why Africans are not united. We are because different religions have different ideologies and different religions base their of course teachings and stuff depending on their own ideology, so which doesn't of course add up and doesn't give up a clear picture of peace and unity. If at all we can see people fighting, Muslims fighting Christians, it doesn't make any sense. So I know it sells. Let me hope you're doing good. I don't know what you say about So like I said, what we see as as religion, I'm sorry for that network had. What we see as religions in Africa and what they have done is just to create of course unity, fake unity. For me, I call it fake unity. Because you can't tell me that, of course, you're creating unity, yet you're engaging in a war. Now, which God are you praising? Which God are you looking up to? If at all we are just seeing war instead of seeing peace. Which God are you praising? Which God are you talking about in the name of religion? A lot of people have been killed. However, a lot of things have been looked up to in African countries like civil wars, like coups. But the religious, of course, issue is also something that can't be undermined in this case. A lot of people have been killed because of religion. A lot of people have been Africans are confused when it comes to religion. The other time I was sharing here pics of a certain pastor in Uganda who moves on a crane in a church, and people think that he flies around. People thinks that he flies around. You find someone believing somebody is on crane, someone is seeing something rolling him in the skies of the church, and someone thinks that it is someone thinks that someone sorry. So someone sorry for that. Someone thinks that someone is flying within the church. A lot of women have been raped in churches and they have nothing to say about it. A lot of kids have been, of course, sodomized in the churches. I'm seeing now all the churches we see in Uganda, not even in Uganda, because these people collaborate. These people promote homosexuality around. A lot of boys, I call them boys, are coming out loud to give testimonies on how they were, of course, sodomized, on how they ate their poo, these church leaders. And people still believe in these churches. People still go in numbers to these churches. These are the people that collect money for every service. These are the people. I guess that's why some governments are so biased about certain religions. They keep on arresting the parties. If at all the government is led by someone who believes in Christianity, they arrest Muslims because they are not secure. They know that this is a trick, this is a weapon to, of course, destroy. This is a weapon to, of course, to disintegrate. This is a weapon to of course make people move far apart, to displace people. This is a political weapon. Religion we are seeing. It's not sorrowful, just like as they talk about. It's not all about healing people's souls. It's not all about working upon people's issues. Someone is not working, goes to the church, plays every day, even borrows money for tithe and offertory in church. This is beyond that. This is a weapon that was set, of course, by colonizers to African countries, so that we are never united. Because you can't unite people who are religious. Even when someone is from, maybe, let it be an African country, at the first time they will ask, like, Innosetu, what is your religion? Before saying anything, which religion is he? Which makes everything tough. We have seen serious wars, and actually, all civil wars we have seen in Africa, let them be in Sudan, let them be in, of course, in Mali, let them be in Chad, let them be in Central African Republic. All of these wars were geared by religion. All these wars were geared by religion, because different religions have their own beliefs and have their own ideologies. Muslims will tell you, for us we don't take alcohol, for us we don't take, however some take, for us we don't take pork. So, like, a lot of things happen. They preach this unity. They preach things that are, of course, that are just that they preach discrimination among Africans. And by the way, the top leaders know how the game is played. The initiators of this kind of religions that we see, they know how everything happens. They know how everything is played. I talked about how, of course, how different people have been killed, how people have been, of course, discriminated. I talked about that 18-year-old Muslim girl in Uganda who was, of course, beaten up, who actually she was beaten to death by the family members for attending a church service. Last time during Ramadan, we were watching here, and actually we had a full show about the Nigerian police arresting Muslims that failed to of course fast during Ramadan. Today, no, on 27th in South Africa, we saw 27th last month in April, we saw a Catholic father being killed, bullets, was shot dead. And he's not the first religious person to be killed in South Africa. This is because of religion. There is no other cause of the deaths of these people, and more thousands and thousands of people that have been killed in the same way. A lot of women have been raped by the wars that have been created on the basis of the religion. So we see that about 800,000 more people were displaced by religion-related armed conflicts in 2014, up to today. Although the number of countries in the region experiencing religious or religion-related armed conflicts that led to large-scale population displacement remain in the same, in, of course, in this year, and of course from 2014 and 2015, we see that more than 19 million people in the Middle East Africa, Middle East North African region were displaced due to such conflicts, and 18.2 in 2013. This is a big number of people that have been displaced. Talking about Mali, a lot of people in Mali were displaced. A lot of people in Mali were displaced to neighboring countries, the Muslim people, because in Mali, a lot of people, almost 85% of the population, they are Christians. So Whenever they see Muslims in Muslim community doesn't exist publicly in of course Mali. So these are African people suffering to what they don't know. They actually they even don't know where it came from. These are people that are not embracing African tradition. These are presidents. Like I said, whenever presidents come into power, they come with their own ideologies, they come with their manifestos. If someone is a Muslim, if at all the president is a Muslim, he will automatically embrace Muslims. It will become a Muslim country, just like in Uganda during Idi Amin Dada's time. And we have seen even a lot of other, of course, leaders that have done so. So a lot happens. A lot happens when it comes to religion in Africa, and of course, the key players of this entire, system, this entire religion stuff. The key players for them are winning. As we may be praising the pastors, how miracleful they are, for them they are busy. For them they are busy stealing our land. As we are in the churches praying for peace in Congo, for them they are having lands, they are guarding mineral areas in Congo. For us, we are in churches praying, praising and praying for Congo people. The same people that brought religion here, they are with guns in Congo, guarding mineral areas. As we are praying to bring peace here, for them they're doing other stuffs that are profitable. So we as Africans, we need a wake up, starting from our education system, which is faulty, because in the Ugandan curriculum, I remember that time when we are studying, you have to study they give you two options. I don't know whether they have added other religions like Baha'i, like Buddhism, like, but there is that provision for a subject of social studies. There is that course unit in primary, in elementary level, that is called social studies. They give you an option of either Muslim or Islamic or of course Christianity. So it's up to you to choose what you want. It's upon you. So as we see that countries are trying to of course fight corruption. Countries are fighting criminals. Countries are trying so much as they can. Let's try to combat the effect. Let's try to combat. Let's try actually to make people aware in Africa the realities of these religions, the background, and where they came from. So, talking about religion in, of course, Africa, religion is, of course, the most profitable business in Africa today. As of 2024, sincerely speaking, religion is one of the most and the best business in Africa today. Because for me, I see these people making money, these people getting free money. Someone wakes up one day, most of these people go on streets, you find them on streets, on roads, forging to preach the gospel. But in reality, these people are taking people's money freely. So religion is the most profitable business in Africa today. So in Africa, starting a church is a guaranteed investment. So SAFA as far more profitable than forex trading, stock market trading, bitcoins, etc. So you can start a church with a little as 20%, 20 US dollars, because most of the churches I see they're made of mats. The churches I see around, they are made of uh, uh, they are made of iron sheets. They are blitis. I don't know how they call them, timber. They're made of timber. They're not serious churches. So we see that in Africa, uh, 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 so started reaping over 20,000 US dollars in just months after starting up that church. This is a sure deal goal. So it only takes a couple of miracle performing actors and actresses to start harvesting in Africa. Africa is very funny. And there is a way Africans want quick things, want magical things, want things to happen at the very highest speed. So um, we see that religion can be loosely defined as a belief in, of course, in supernaturals or powers that control human destiny. That is African tradition. It can also refer to the institutionalization of such beliefs and their practices. So there are thousands of religions and denominations in the world. However, the most dominant ones in Africa are Islam and Christianity, and others because we have Baha'i in Uganda and others. So in religion, we were made to believe that we were created by God. In religion, who expects us to live and act according to certain given tenets so that we can be found worthy of his blessings, grace, and love both here and on earth and afterlife. This is religion. So each of these religions or dominion or dominations have their own guiding books, which they refer to as holy books, and which is supposed to dictate to of course uh, dictate the way, the manner their adherents should live their lives and relate to others in a society. In Islam, it is the Quran, whereas in Christians, it is the Bible. So much as the intentions and, of course, ultimate aim of religion generally is to promote peace, harmony, and development in the society, the same cannot be said in reality as what happens. So there are some, we see that religion is one of the major cause of conflicts in Africa and the world as a whole. Each sect or domination always believes its way and practices as being the approved or acceptable one, and as such, and in such a view, others others either as inferior or threat to theirs. So this has led to verbal and sometimes physical confrontations, leading to loss of property and even lives in places like Nigeria and Central African Republic, which I've been talking about. So uh, even among Muslims, there are conflicts between Sunni and, of course, Shiite sects over practices, whereas among Christians, there are doctrinal conflicts or misunderstandings among the various many dominations, including which is even the right day to congregate for worship. So, added to the above, a lot of religious misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and so called prophecies have brought about among family members, leading to destruction of broken homes and even death. It is not uncommon to read in the media that a man has killed and of course, or maimed his mother, child, or wife as a result of prophecy he claims to have heard about the victim from his pastor or religious leader. So that is religion. because um, when you look at there is a direct relationship between religion and laziness, leading to poverty of course, in our part of in Africa. Let me repeat this. There is a direct relationship between religion and laziness, leading to poverty. There is a way religion has made very many people lazy. Like someone thinks I'm going to pray, just laying down, just staying cambo, like in church, like he's going to get a job. Someone is going to get money. You know these pastors. Whenever we go to churches, they tell you, yeah, Innosetu, you want a car? Yeah, you want a car? Get it. That's how these people pray. So a lot of believers would rather spend their time attending one religious event or other throughout the year at the expense of their work or source of livelihood. It is not uncommon to see church services from morning till evening, but we see them born again. I see born agains. They start their services at 9 in the morning. They end in the evening at 6. The entire day you are at the church. No working, no eating. You are at the church praising the Lord. So it is not uncommon. We see that there is no doubt that the more time a person spends his or her religious program to neglect his work, is less income to the person is earning, leading to poverty. But people don't see this. People Oh, sorry. Sorry, Jibchaba. Hell, Jibchaba. Let me hope you're doing good. How has been your day? Finally, you came here. Let me hope you can hear me now. Let me hope you can hear me. Can hear me now. Let me hope you can hear me, Jibu Jaba. Let me hope you're doing good. Oh, that's great. Um, Jibjaba, you found me talking about religious wars in, of course, Africa, and I've been talking about the impact and how religion is of no use and is not relevant in African communities. I've been talking about how there is no direct relationship between where there is a direct relationship between religion and laziness. A lot of people have left. A lot of people have left their jobs. A lot of people have left their jobs. A lot of people have failed to work just because they think, well, if they pray, they are going to, of course, get jobs. They are going to get money in their pockets. They spend nights and days on churches. We see that a lot of religious adherents are made to believe that there is no need for working harder on this earth to amass wealth. So after all you will one day you will die soon and leave your possessions behind. And these people who prophesize, who talk about like you don't need to work hard, you don't need to have assets, you don't need to have possessions on earth. They're having a lot of money. To pray for you, you have to pay in something. You have to pay in offertory. You have to pay in tithe. So this has made a lot of people lazy. So thus they should these pastors tell people that they should seek the kingdom of God first, and all others shall be added unto them. And that is Matthew chapter 6 verse 33. So this is definitely false. The more you work, the more you earn. Is how life works, I think, in simple mathematics. Yeah, well, thanks. I catch Yoli play. Wow. Okay, Jiba. Unfortunately, today I'm not with Maria. Yeah, I'm not with her. I'm alone in the building. Yeah, prosperity preachers plant a seed and it grows. Crazy, crazy. We see that also religion makes many of its adherents lethargic instead of being proactive on issues affecting their lives. So you'll come across someone with a symptom of a disease who will, of course, rather pray instead of going to the health center at the first sign till the condition actually deteriorates. It's thus not a wonder to find a lot of course, preventable diseases killing or, of course, maiming people in our society. People, whenever they see anything, they will run to their pastors. Pastor, I'm having back pain. Pastor, last night I had a headache. I don't know why I'm having headache. So the pastor will tell, of course, the sheep that you know what, you bring in some offer trays, some tithes, so that we can pray for you, stuff. It's something that it doesn't. Actually, in Nigeria, with a religious belief index of 96%, had a maternal mortality rate of 630 out of every 10,000 births. Whereas we see that people, whenever they could get issues, they could go to churches. Yep, the caption of this ship today. It is crazy. Because I don't know why people don't wake up. Like, don't wake up on these simple things. Someone like these people, pastors in Africa, and and by the way, we see that religion creates a sense of fear or timidity in its, of course, adherents. Most of the religious sermons on our airwaves, we see that are usually warnings or threats to people, do not do or refrain from doing one thing or other to avoid a curse of course of domination from God. So it's quite common to hear statements like stop drinking alcohol, you will go to hell. If you don't pay your tithes, your blessings will be withheld by God. You will be poorer. If you dress provocatively, you could be raped. If you don't repent, you will die sooner than you think, and so many other fear, of course, mongering stuff. The reality is that a lot of these untruths sink into the consciousness of their listeners, who also usually afraid to go out of their way to think independently and act on their own. It's much dangerous, even with kids, where they are, of course, indoctrinated from their homes, schools, and churches to toe certain line or face hell, fire, or danger in life. A lot of young people a lot of young people have been of course indoctrinated into this religious stuff, into these religious ideologies when they are still young. Like you at home, you train your kids to behave differently at school whenever they go for preaching. Whenever preaching abroad at school, they are told different things. They are told about hell. They are told about fire. They are told about heaven. They're told about, like, that is how people live in a line of fear. That's why these people keep on going to churches and mosques. Yes, because they don't want to do sin. They don't want to become poorer. They don't want to be they don't want to lose their blessings. They don't want blessings to be taken away from them. They want to maintain that blessings, that blessing from them. They don't want to sin. And we see that religion has created an avenue for a lot of charlatans parading as so-called men of God to freeze the poor of their, of course, migratory resources. They will readily quote all verses in the Bible. There is a church. There is a church which we normally pass by with Maria. But whenever we pass via that church, they pray every day. They pray every day. We normally pass there. But for me, I don't know, maybe it's me who's not lucky. But whenever we pass via that church, they bring those verses that talk about possessions, that talk about tithe, how to pay tribute, how to sow seeds so that you can yield in the future. So these, of course, readily quote verses in the Bible to support the need for members to donate their monies to work of God. These monies mostly find their way into the pockets of these, of course, charlatans to fund their luxurious lifestyles, which, while the members continue to sink in poverty, pain, confusion, ignorance, uh, hunger. People spend like the entire day on churches without eating anything. So a lot of these preachers are living in luxurious homes, driving the latest luxury cars, expensive cars, latest numbers, traveling to most exotic holiday destinations with their families. They said, Pastor so and so, we are collecting money for Bishop who is now going to Latin, is going to, of course, to Basilica, is going to USA for a vacation, is going to Miami for a vacation, is going to South Africa for a vacation. You sponsor their, of course, luxurious travels. So we see that educating their children in the most expensive schools, these so-called charlatans, the pastors, the leaders of the church, whereas most of their followers can barely pay their utility bills and kids' fees even in public schools. I find most of these people who support churches, they have even invested too much into the BS to listen to the reason. Yeah, true. This is true, Jabba. This is true. Very true. Pastor Pork Chop. Yeah, this is true. So loosen your palm settle. Let the money flow out and go so it comes back tenfold. It is crazy. It is crazy. And people don't wake up. People don't wake up. By the way, for me, I call it scam. For me, I was scammed when I was a little. I was scammed to up to when I was 16. I realized, or like, I was like, why am I paying this money? Where does this money going? For me, I studied in missionary schools in Uganda, like from my elementary education to high school to university. I was in missionary schools, but these